Canon has discontinued the Canon M6 Mark II, an APS-C mirrorless camera for their EF-M mount. Details coming up, but first I encourage you to subscribe and choose all notifications so you're kept informed on the latest camera gear, news, and rumors just like this. Canon released the M6 Mark II back in September of 2019, so it's been out for a little over 2 years. It was released at the same time as the Canon 90D, both cameras being very popular amongst hobbyists, the Canon 90D being a DSLR, while the M6 Mark II a mirrorless version of the 90D on the EF-M mount. But since then, we've heard many rumors starting up in mid-2020 that Canon is discontinuing the EF-M mount, is that they're coming out with an exit plan to move away from the EF-M mount. And if you own the EF-M mount, one of the frustrations is if you have bought EF-M glass, well, there's no way of migrating that to the R system or even to the EF system. Unless, of course, you bought the EF to EF-M adapter, where you could adapt EF glass, and then, of course, you can take that glass and adapt it to the R system. So there's been nothing that's been validated that the EF-M mount has been canceled, at least up until today. You see, Canon Rumors reports that several retailers are telling them that the M6 Mark II has been discontinued. Not that production has been halted, that it's been discontinued, and there's a big difference. Discontinued means that's it. There's no more units going to be produced. They'll keep selling it until inventory just fades away. They might even continue to produce lenses if there's enough demand, but essentially, that's it. Over a couple of years, you probably won't be able to buy this camera at all. In some regions in the world, you can't buy the M6 Mark II at all right now. Whereas a halt in production is simply that. They've halted production. And you see this with Sony. They've done this a lot with some cameras. I believe the A7C was one of those cameras that was halted for a short period of time. And what's happening is there's so many constraints due to, well, so many different things, parts, material supplies, chip shortages, shipping channels, everything. And what's essentially happening is camera companies are prioritizing. Okay, we'll produce so many units of the A7C, we'll stop production, halt production, and now we'll produce units of the A7 A7S3, and then we'll do the Alpha 1 or whatever. They keep halting production and dynamically changing things. And I've heard this many times over the last year that Sony's no longer making the A7C or Sony's no longer making the A7S3, which is not the case. But in this case, according to Canon Rumors, they are being discontinued. Usually when a camera company decides to say, that's it, we're discontinuing this camera, there's already a successor in place. Well, that isn't the case right now. We've heard many rumors that Canon's supposed to be coming out with up to 3 APS-C cameras for the R system. So again, mirrorless, but they're going to be using that R system that Canon's developed using the RF mount, although it might use an RFS mount based on a previous video that I put out, this one referencing here, that Canon might come out with an RFS mount for APS-C censored cameras. So let's take a look at what's most likely. The latest rumor, again, from this video here, a little bit different. This video is all about the Canon R7. This one has been confirmed, validated by multiple sources, that Canon is coming out with an R7 this year. It was due in March, but now we're hearing it's going to be around August. And I don't really think that this is designed to be a replacement for the M6 Mark II, and here's why. If we look at the M6 Mark II, which is basically the same as the 90D, feature capability-wise, they're pretty much identical. One's DSLR, one's mirrorless. They're priced at around, what, $11.99, $12.99 based on what their list price is. And they're still right around that price point. Well, the 7D was considerably more than that. And based on what we're seeing for the Canon EOS R7, this camera is probably going to be priced somewhere between around $1,500 US and around $2,000 US. So we're looking at a high-end camera. The R7 is supposed to be that high-end camera, a successor to the Canon 7D Mark II. The 90D is still out there. No sense that that camera is being discontinued. And that would be a mid-level hobbyist camera. And then, of course, what about an entry level like an SL2, an SL3 replacement? So we're looking at essentially 3 APS-C censored cameras for the R system that were rumored to be announced in late 2021, which didn't happen. Now we're hearing 2022. And right now we're only hearing about the Canon R7. And let's take a look at the specifications, because I want you to see these specifications. The R7 is supposed to have a 32.5 megapixel sensor. It's supposed to be BSI. It doesn't mention, the rumor doesn't mention whether it's stacked or not. And it is an APS-C sensor, of course, mirrorless camera, because it's going to be on the RF mount. Whether it has an RF mount or an RFS, They're both going to fit on that same mount, such as the Canon EOS R5, the R6. And I suspect that the R5 and the R6, all the full frame cameras, will also be able to adapt these lenses as well. Well, not adapt, they'll be able to use these lenses no problem. That's what I suspect, because if you currently have the EF to RF adapter, which I have up here somewhere, right here, this one's $199 because it's got the ring. The cheapest one is $99, and I'm able to adapt EFS lenses onto my R5 and the R6. And you never used to be able to do this in DSLRs. Basically, APS-C glass would not adapt. You couldn't mount it onto full frame cameras. It was something to do with hitting the mirror. But of course, if you had an APS-C camera, you could take EF glass, which was designed for the full frame mount, and mount it right onto your 70D, 50D, 40D, and so on. So a 32 megapixel sensor, APS-C on the R system, whether it be the RFS mount or the RF mount. It's also going to have a Digic X processor. It's going to be capable of 20 frames per second mirrorless. That's the same as the R5 and the R6, although you're going to be down at around 32.5 megapixels. But again, the R6 is only around 20 megapixels. In terms of video, it's going to be able to do 4K up to 60 frames per second, 240 frames in 1080. And this is something really exciting. It's going to have a CF Express Type B card slot, as well as a UHS 2 card slot. And again, it's going to be available, well, it's going to be announced in August this year. Whether we get to purchase it in August is another thing, and we don't know if it's going to be at the beginning or the end of the month. It is going to have the R3 hot shoe, the multi-purpose hot shoe, and it's going to look very much like the R5 and the R6. I sense to save money on die work, they're basically going to use the exact same camera case. Maybe some buttons might differ, but it's going to use the same sort of ergonomics and shape function design as the R5. So I find it a little bit strange that without any successor announced for the M6 Mark II or even the 90D, we're already hearing information reports from retailers saying that the M6 Mark II has been discontinued. And I'm not saying that it hasn't. We need more information. I'd like to see this validated a bit more. And Canon Rumors says more to come more is to come on this. But as far as the R7 replacing this, I don't know about you, but I think the R7 is far more than the 90D or the M6 Mark II. I think it sits above it. And there are 3 holes at the very least. There is, of course, the R7, a successor for the 7D Mark II, but there's also a hole for a 90D successor to show up on the R system. And it makes sense. Canon has come out and said many times that their focus, the bulk of their development, is going to be on the RF mount. They've more or less said they're stopped producing for the EF mount, which includes the EFM mount, and that should really tell us not to expect too much for the EFM mount. But even the 90D, well, the M6 Mark II is priced at around $849. The Canon 90D is priced just over $1,000 based on availability. And then, of course, there's some sort of entry-level APS-C, something that comes at around the level of the SL2 and the SL3. And many pundits have projected that they think that the days are over for APS-C and that the days are over for entry-level APS-C cameras, especially when you look at the price of smartphones and their cameras being quite capable. And this is true. When it comes to taking stills, the iPhone 12, the iPhone 13 are truly amazing. I have one and they're very good. But when it comes to video, they're absolutely terrible in low light situations. And I'm not talking about at night. I'm talking about indoors. I'm talking about low light situations like you're being in a forest or it's before the sun sets or when the sun rises. I've taken them out there. I've shot video and the amount of noise is absolutely terrible. The amount of detail is terrible. Nothing replaces a proper camera, a proper mirrorless camera. But again, the market has been truncating. We're looking at around 5 to 7 million units shipped each year. And this year, 2022, based on the latest CEPA numbers, don't look like, well, January, February, March are all down over 2020 and 2021. So is Canon making strategic decisions? Well, we'll just have to wait and see. The R7 is coming out, but will Canon release other cameras alongside the R7 aimed at the hobbyist market, aimed as a successor to the Canon 90D and an entry-level APS-C camera? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. But if you want to stay up to date on absolutely the latest camera news and rumors to see where this story goes, I recommend not only subscribe, but choose all notifications so that way as soon as I publish a video, you're in the know. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.